One of the biggest myths in the workplace is that your work should speak for itself. If you just keep your head down and work hard and deliver really good results, eventually somebody's going to notice, right? And for a long time, I believed that because it seemed like it was fair and reasonable. But after more than 20 years in leadership, reality has taught me that the two are very different. Great work earns credibility. Visibility creates opportunity. So, today we're going to talk about what visibility really is, why it matters even if you're excellent at your job, and how to become more visible and stay true to yourself. So, stand by. Welcome to Crossroads and Catalysts. I'm your host, Shanita B. This is where we explore how a thoughtful, wise, and strategic perspective at life's crossroads can become the catalyst for meaningful change in your leadership and the direction of your life. So I recently saw somebody compare visibility to professional advertising, and I thought that that was pretty interesting. Because when you think of advertising, I think a lot of us cringe when we think of that in the context of how we present ourselves, right? And how others perceive us. So we definitely don't want to assign that marketing and advertising type moniker to ourselves. But I don't want you to think about it as selling yourself because advertising exists for one reason, and that one reason is awareness. And that's the purpose of advertising. So if people don't know what you do or the problems that you solve or the value that you bring, you probably won't be on the short list when opportunities arise because there is no awareness about who you are. So I want you to think about it like this. If you're not visible, then you're just warming the bench. And meanwhile, you got the real players out here, and they're the ones who are not afraid to showcase themselves and their work, and they're getting all the plays. And I want to be clear about this because we're all on the bench at some point, but the goal is not to stay there. You don't want to remain in a permanent place on the bench, okay, just to count as a part of the total team. Visibility is not simply about physical presence, okay? It has a lot to do with influence and the ability to drive performance and ask insightful questions. And so you're giving people a sense of who you are and what you bring. And this is why it's so important. So, by the end of this episode, you're going to understand what visibility is and why it is absolutely necessary, and how, when it's done correctly, it can enhance not only your opportunities, but your image. So, if these episodes are helping you think differently about leadership, I want us to stay connected, okay? Be sure to join my email list using the link in the show notes because that's where I'm going to share some additional insights, and I'll let you know about upcoming workshops and resources that I don't always talk about here on the podcast. So, jumping back in, when we talk about visibility, visibility is intentionally helping people around you understand your value, your thinking, and your leadership. This is not you giving them a rundown of your resume, but you're actively showing them that you are a critical part of this team, of this department, of this organization. Okay. So the crossroads is not whether you work hard. I already know that you work hard. And part of the reason why you're listening is because you're trying to think through your situation and how to navigate that. But the crossroads is this, okay? Are you relying upon your work to tell your story, or are you intentionally helping people understand the value behind that work? I want you to notice how one of these is passive while the other is active. The other is one is requiring other people to take notice, which means that they have to do the work. While if you look at that secondary one with intentionally helping people to understand your value, this is you playing a role in helping others to see who you are and what you do. And I know that somewhere along the way, a lot of us have adopted the belief that speaking about our work somehow diminishes the work and that it's calling more attention to ourselves rather than the work. Silence does not create humility. Sometimes it simply creates obscurity. So if you're too quiet, then no one is going to know who you are, and they're not going to know the type of work that you do. Okay. The workplace has evolved and it no longer serves those who rely upon the get or done approach. And you know what I mean, right? It's just let me go in and just get it done and we'll move on to the next thing. And that's basically just putting your head down and getting the output in the right place, in the right hands. But the longer you choose to rely upon hard work alone speaking for you, the longer you will frustrate yourself because you're going to watch people around you make strides and progress. And you're going to be in the same place where you were. And if you sit back and you're honest with yourself, then you'll probably recognize that the difference is that they are okay with calling attention to their work. They're okay with having conversations that maybe you thought you could never do because you just didn't think that that was appropriate. But let me tell you, it is very appropriate for you to to add the voice to your work, okay? Your work is an inanimate object. It doesn't have a voice. You have the voice and you must use it to speak on your behalf. The work is merely the supporting evidence of your ability to get things done and to influence people. And so we need to make sure that we keep that in our minds, right? And I read an article that quoted a senior manager as stating, if people cannot see your value, they assume that it's not there. Think about that. The fact that someone can't see something, it goes back to that old adage, out of sight, out of mind. So in this article, that was the point that they were making because they were talking about visibility. Consider this, right? Because it doesn't mean that your value isn't real. But what it could mean is that people make decisions based on the information that they have. And if your contribution and who you are as a person is not known to those who are making decisions, it's out of sight, out of mind. And so this ultimately means that you have to give your work legitimacy. Okay? So this is a sign that you got to do something different. And I can tell you that top leaders know this to be true. And I've seen this in real life. And I can tell you that in a recent conversation that I had with an executive, he expressed that if other people in the organization don't know your name, that that's a problem. And he wasn't saying it to me specifically and pointedly, but we were having a conversation about some of the things that the organization was doing to try to build up its leaders. And so this particular thing came about because of how important it is that the organization become one organization. When you have companies that are spread out all over the United States, it is very difficult to operate in one seamless flow. Okay. And if you're in an environment like that where you have counterparts in other states, other cities, whatever the case may be, if they don't know your name, that's not a good thing, because if they don't know your name, that probably means that the leaders in those areas don't know your name. Because this person went on to give me an example of how it was only within the last couple of months that he came to know the name of an employee who has a 12-year tenure. 12 years. 12 years of experience, 12 years of contribution. And yet one of the organization's executives had only recently learned this person's name. That is not a performance problem, okay? Because I can assure you that in 12 years, the fact that that person had been there for that long, they were probably producing some really good work. What it is a visibility problem. And I hope that you are starting to understand my point. For someone who is trying to make waves, or maybe waves is not the right word. You're trying to make some positive steps to maximize your position, to grow, whatever the case is. People have to know who you are. Okay. So now that you understand what visibility is, I want you to look at the choices that you have. Okay. Because you're going to have to ask yourself a question. Not necessarily, will I become more visible? What I want you to ask yourself is, will I continue hoping that someone notices, or will I intentionally become known? Okay. So this means that you're going to have to do some things differently. And visibility can take on many forms and shapes. This could look like you just simply speaking up in a meeting instead of waiting for someone to ask your thoughts or opinion on a particular topic. Or maybe you can be proactive and you can start sharing progress before a project is finished. Status updates are crucial in some instances, and that can be very valuable information to those who have the ultimate decision making authority to make changes. Okay. You could also start building relationships outside of your immediate team. And this is really, I think, crucial because while your immediate team, they're going to know who you are, maybe your counterparts in another area on another team, maybe they need to know who you are. Maybe you need to know who they are. You have to make those connections. You could also volunteer for some cross functional work. Talk to your boss about this. What kind of projects are underway, or is there some kind of way that I can be plugged into some work groups to contribute? These are the things that you want to go after because this is the low hanging fruit. This is some of the easiest uh, things that you can do to help bring visibility to who you are and what you contribute. Okay. Another thing that you can do is just be really thoughtful about the questions that you ask so that conversations can move forward. Maybe you're in a situation where you get on a call and nobody wants to make a decision. So at the end of the call, nobody has indicated, okay, these are the steps that we're going to take, and this is the deadline by which we're going to take these steps. Maybe you can be the one to initiate that and say, okay, well, I think that we've had this conversation. I heard A, B, and C. Who's going to take on this? And just because you're the person who speaks up about it does not necessarily mean that you're the person who has to do it. You just might be the person who is necessary to that conversation to help bring it together and outline some actions that need to be taken for the next round. Okay. It doesn't have to be something that is difficult or something that requires you to be loud or obnoxious. That's not the point. The point is that you go from being silent and just kind of blending into the wall to being that person who people know that when you show up, that we're going to get down to business, that we're going to solve some problems, that we're going to detail some action steps, that we're going to have some level of accountability. And this does not have anything to do with your level of authority. Okay. This has everything to do with you bringing your contribution to the forefront. All right. So if today's episode made you realize that you have been waiting for your work to speak for itself, I want you to download my What's Next guide. And this is a guide to clarity and confident decisions. It's going to give you some prompts that are going to help you to think through your crossroads, get clear about it. It's going to actually help you to think through what your choices are. And then it's going to help you to think through the actions that you could take. It's never about taking big steps. If you start with the small steps, you're going to build the momentum that you need to continue to move forward. Okay? Because this is what's going to help you to identify those things. You don't want to stay stuck. All right? You want to be very specific and particular about what you do next. So here's my challenge for you for this next week. I don't want you to try to be more impressive because generally that doesn't work out for anybody. You end up feeling foolish and sometimes you end up looking foolish. I want you to become more visible. And how I want you to do that is help one new person understand the value that you bring. If it's in a conversation with your boss, the people who are closest to you are oftentimes the best people for you to try out these new things. And especially if you have a really good working relationship with them, they will give you some feedback that will be helpful to you. All right. So if you're working on a project, if you're working on not even a major project, but it could be a small project and you're making some progress or you have some ideas about how you think that it can be improved, share those things. That's where you're going to start to spark those conversations and help to move some things to the next level. All right. You can also share some insight that you have, even if it's an article that you read that is related to the work industry, your vocation. You can share that. People really do like that type of information. All right. You can also ask a thoughtful question or you can volunteer for an opportunity. And you always want to be aware when you move forward with things like this. You don't want to take on more than you can handle, but you want to avail yourself to opportunities. So if you get wind of something, or you ask your boss if they're aware of some things that are going on, that would be an avenue to help get you the visibility that you're seeking. Okay. It is one thing that will help you to get there. So these are small moments. And if you continue to repeat these things and do them consistently, before you know it, others will know who you are. They will know what you do. They will know how you do it. And they will understand the value that you bring, not just the output, not just your deliverables. All right. So next week, we're going to be talking about one of the biggest visibility transitions in your career. And so this is going to be for those who are moving from the individual contributor to the leader, because there are some gaps that I want to help you to fill so that you can make that transition as smooth as possible. Because the things that made you successful before, they might not necessarily be what help you to be successful now. All right. So until next time, be thoughtful, be wise, be strategic. And remember, crossroads reveal who you are, catalysts shape who you become. Every decision matters. So make it count. I'll talk to you next week.